Thank you all for being with us this evening, Tuesday, February 1st, first council meeting of the month. At this time, I'll call on Nathan Barrett for the prayer, and at the conclusion of the prayer, Jane Shambra will lead us in the pledge. Mr. Barrett.
Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to live in the greatest city on earth. We ask for you to be with us today. Help us to make the right decisions for our family. I ask for your blessings upon each and every one in this room and everyone in the city of Biloxi. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett, and thank you, Mrs. Shambra. This time, I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Lawrence. Is there a second?
I'll second.
By Mr. Barrett. Any discussion? All in favor of suspending the rules? It's a 5-0 vote for the clerk. Thank you. If the clerk would read the revisions, please.
To the consent agenda, we're adding item 5H, resolution creating capital project number 1092 Point Redevelopment Program. Adding 5I, resolution authorizing agreement with Machado Botano for capital project 1092. Adding 5J, resolution authorizing change order number 8 with Nikkei Brothers for hurricane infrastructure. And to the routine agenda, we're adding a docket in the amount of $46,583.41.
Move the agenda as amended.
All right, there's a motion to approve the agenda as amended by Mr. Lawrence. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Barrett. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. It's a 5-0 vote for the clerk. That brings us to the mayor's report. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, it's the beginning of February, and we have 28 days. We got a lot packed into February. Couple of things to note. This is the beginning of the Black History Month, as well as the Lunar New Year, and we wish everyone to have a tremendous time in this February. We also have a celebration coming up in February the 13th, the founding day of Biloxi, and we're going to unveil. While he was only 5 foot something, we got a 7-foot statue of Fred Hayes going up at the lighthouse, and that's going to be a big celebration. Since Adam and Eve, there's only been 24 men to circle around the moon. He was one of 24, as well as the tremendous mission in Apollo 13. We do have. I'll ask David Newman to come up and give us a report as soon as I finish this statement. And if I forgot anything else, but anyway, I would ask the City Council to spread the expenses of the Biloxi Travel credit card to the minutes. All right, David, you're up with regard to the audit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We do have MLK parade is this Saturday, right? Sunday, excuse me. Yeah.
Hey, thank you for having me. David Newman with the CPA firm Piltz Williams La Rosa, located in Biloxi. I'm here to deliver your September 30th, 2020 audited or financial statement audit report. Real briefly, I'll just go over the highlights with you. It's a 121-page report, but if you go to page 14, that's the independent auditor's report, and on that report it'll tell you had an unqualified opinion over your basic financial statements. If you flip back to page 114, that's your schedule of federal awards. We also have no findings or question costs for the audit of any of the federal monies. And that's all I have to report.
Great, David. Thank you. Any questions or anything? If we can't answer it today, we'll make sure we'll address it if you have any questions later on.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Newman.
That concludes my report.
Mr. Lawrence, do you have a question? Anybody have a question?
No, just
Okay. This is our first opportunity to look at it, so we appreciate the
Right.
job in getting it
David,
to us.
appreciate everything.
Thank you, Mr. Newman.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. There are no departmental reports. Council reports. Start with Mr. Lawrence.
I had a couple of things I need to check on, we developing a Frisbee Park right there on Hopkins Boulevard. They've been putting all the baskets up just the last few days. They've been putting baskets up like they have, different places where you. It's all on.
Oh, disc golf, yeah, oh, Frisbee, I got you. I thought you Mr. Frisbee, I thought you.
I'm saying they have.
Yeah, the disc
Where'd that
golf.
come from? Is who
Yeah.
doing, the city doing it,
I
obviously.
think we had, I'm not aware.
It's a very small park.
Yeah, Frisbee.
in conjunction
Going
with
Frisbee,
Main Street.
golf.
And I think the Llama Brewery, they had got some donations, put those sort of baskets that people, it's sort of like a golf course, but like you said, it's for frisbees.
Like in Hiller Park. Frisbee golf, yeah. Not Mr. Frisbee, just Frisbee golf.
Sherry Bell,
Disc golf.
Where is he?
she's involved with it as well. We control that area underneath the interstate through our, we have a lease, free lease from PennDOT to use that area underneath for really parks and recreation type purposes. So we have the walking track, we're talking about some bicycle tracks, upgrading down the road, and this is sort of the latest addition to that.
So do they have a lease with us, Fly Llama? How you worked that out? You said they bought everything and put it up? So do you have a lease with them, or they just using it?
I think the baskets are probably owned by the city, or gonna be donated to the city. I don't know the exact details, but it's just like anything underneath there. The basketball courts that are there nearby, there's a little dog walking park there. Those are all maintained by the city.
Okay. The people that saw it think it's a great idea. I was just wondering where it came from. The other thing is, I need to ask the mayor, I've had a couple phone calls about Keegan's Bayou. What some of the plans we have for the future? Are we going to try to develop it, dredge it out?
Right, we initially, about 3 years ago, we started asking Thailand's and Go Mesa about, the development of a eco-tourism kind of place, and it involves about $8 million of the dredging, is what we had been asking, Mike, as far as Keegan's Bayou. Yeah.
You want to know about Keegan's Bayou?
Yeah, if there are any plans for walking paths and that sort of thing, which I think we already have some.
So we have a Gomesa project that's been in play for a couple of years now that has not been funded. It involves not only dredging of Keegan's Bayou, but also a number of amenities, including kayak launches and so forth. We've recently taken that project and put it into the Restore Act portal in hopes that, working with the governor's staff, that we may be able to get it funded through that direction. It's $4 million. But what we've done differently this year is we've got a letter signed by the 81st Group Commander, Wing Commander at Keesler, stating that Keegan's Bayou is a threat to Keesler because it has not been dredged and it's beginning to back up into the base. I think that may just get somebody's attention.
That make a big difference, because you probably need to drop it 4 or 5 feet anyway.
As you know, Councilman, there's a very lovely little park area down with a walking track and fancy ornamental lighting and so forth that's just been kind of overgrown, and nobody really knows it's there. Right off
East side of
off Bayview, and borders on the bayou. It's a success story waiting to be found.
Well, I knew the bayou was backed up when the drainage culverts, the bayou's higher than them now.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to drop them so they'll drain. Like you said, with the new construction, there's way more water going to come through there.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely needs to be adjusted. And the one in Back Bay is looking great. They're about finished. The walkway on Back Bay by the old hospital.
I think they're installing.
Another Go Mesa project.
And that thing is looking good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are going to be shocked when they finish with that, how good that is, and we got to walk up and down it. Great walkway, Well, we can't say, we have to say walkway now.
I didn't say boardwalk, walkway.
The mayor's objective through these years has been to get more people access to the waterfront. So in addition to that boardwalk, as you know, we finished the East Biloxi Living Shoreline a couple of years ago from the point back to Palace. And now, as you can plainly see on the front beach, all the way from Oak Street to Small Craft Harbor, we've got a beautiful 10-foot wide boardwalk built out of concrete, a concrete boardwalk that's coming along very nicely right now. It's going to be a lot of tourists walking and residents walking that stretch of beach.
Yeah, it's almost you do better making everything concrete, get rid of grass altogether. And we don't have to maintain it and cut it or anything.
Yep.
You know, the more concrete you put out there, it's easy to clean up anything with it. So that's a good thing. I know we've been waiting to hear from any good news on money for the bridge from Homeland Security.
We're
All the
still
people
chasing
applying
that.
for all this
There's some
money.
opportunities that DOT may have, and we've in contact with our folks, Keith Hurd and some of those DOT connections we're trying to push. We may be going to DC to ask over and above just the normal $3.3 billion to 12 or 15 million for infrastructure, but we're still chasing it.
Yeah. And Peter, on the Swetman House, is there any news? I know we put that out to have a report on what we can do with it, clean it up, fix it up.
We don't have our inspection report is not finished yet, but it should be shortly. I'll follow up on that.
Right.
And on the cemetery lots, are we starting to sell them already?
Stacy, I think those are going up for sale probably the first of next week or probably tomorrow. So,
So this week sometime?
yes, sir.
People have been inquiring to know when it is actually going to be for sale.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Ms. Newman?
Yes, so recently I got about 3 emails in a row from constituents, and they were praising our public works for coming out doing jobs that we put orders in, and they immediately came out and did a phenomenal job, leaving it like they never were there in the first place. And it was just, we never get a thank you, so I wanted to make sure that Billy knew that we're thankful and keep up the good work.
The guys that were up in to their waists and freezing water a week ago will very much appreciate hearing that.
Mr. Deming, anything?
Mr. Mayor, excuse me. Dredging. Any movement on any dredging projects?
Yeah, look, we had a couple of meetings about the submerged. That's kind of put us in a bad place with regard to submerged vegetations. We kind of discovered that there may be some opportunity that if we were to dredge some of the submerged vegetations in some of the places we had looked at initially, there may be some mitigation, almost like the tree. If we had another area where this vegetation, if so many square feet or acres of vegetation, we would have to pull up and relocate it there. So that was I guess a revelation that we didn't know was possible. So that may kick in another round. I know several of the locations said we couldn't touch it because of the submerged vegetation, but there's a window there I think we're going to try and look through.
We have a dredging master plan that has a long list of projects, and they've been priced by area. We don't have any dredging money right now. We have a $300,000 ask in this year's Tidelands request, which is before the legislature today. So one of the things I would ask you to do, if you could pile on with us, with Kevin Felcher and Scott Delano, or any other legislatures, and let them know that we're desperate to do some dredging. As the mayor says, the problem with dredging, it's gotten twice as expensive because we not only have to dredge the area before, but we have to actually restore that same square footage of grasses, or whatever, submerged vegetation at another site. And we don't have a lot of sites to work with. We're thinking about the shoreline of Hiller Park, pushing it out. Perhaps some in Causeway Park, perhaps Sherman Canaan Harbor down on the beach. One of the areas where the city owns some land that's on the bay, where we can build out and mitigate. Shall we say, Hiller Park, we could probably get 300 square yards of mitigation out of that shoreline, and then we could go dredge 300 square yards somewhere else. But DMR permitting has made it very, very difficult. And I feel for anybody that's got a waterfront property that is getting shallower and shallower. because there's just not a whole lot we can do right now.
Yeah, and a lot of it's not just the waterfront property, it's getting shallower and shallower. It's all the small canals where people buy homes with access to the water from their backyards, and those are just getting filled. In value, what does $300,000 in Thailand's funds get us? What,
Maybe 2 or 3 sites.
wow.
I think we had 2 million before. Didn't we go through the 2 million in the first rounds? I believe that's what it was. We had Yellow Park, I think. and-
Thailand's, as you have seen over time, as we get these Thailand's grants, they tend to be small. I mean, it's rare that a Thailand's grant is more than $500,000. They're very rarely big $1 million grants anymore because they're spreading the Thailand's trust fund money across the entire Gulf Coast, which doesn't leave a whole lot for Biloxi. That's a sore point for us that you're aware of.
Don't get me started on that.
Don't get him started on that.
That's all I have, thank you.
And if you wish, I'll be happy to share that master plan, one-page list of all the project sites with you, and they're really by priority, so.
Okay, if you would, I'd love to see the priority list, but is the list any different than the last one you sent me maybe 6 months ago?
Same old, same old. No new sites.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Deming. Mr. Barrett?
Just a couple things really quick. I guess everyone's going to talk about dredging tonight. I brought it up a couple weeks ago, but Parker's Creek boat launch is just getting really bad. That's the only city boat launch in our ward, and it's getting really, really bad. Second thing is the work at the park's coming around really nice. I just wanted to follow up. I know that we approved the contract a couple of weeks ago for the fencing around the pickleball court and the basketball court, but we haven't done anything yet on the fencing around that pump station. Is that something that we can get going pretty soon? It's just real unsightly. And then the other thing I know we've done it in the past on some other projects. Is there any way that we could do some type of lease or partner agreement with Mississippi Power or Coast Electric for some lighting out there as well? It gets dark at 5 o'clock and there's no lights anywhere around. It's pitch black. If we could, do get some kind of partnership with them or lease deal or something like that with them on that. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I just have one thing.
Councilman, follow up if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
You are, your Eagle Point neighborhood is having a lot of fun these days with the boring that AT&T is doing. They have just given us their projects now for the boring in wards 4 and 6, and I would invite both of those councilmen to get a time with us and let us walk you through the plans, because we're not going to let them do everything at once, but it's a very aggressive plan where AT&T is boring all over the city as Councilman Barrett found out the hard way, and some of the places where they're boring.
Yeah, they're utilizing
Surprise.
all the easement, cutting through sprinkler systems and everything, but they're going as far as they can off the road.
I'd happy to have you down to engineering and go through the drawings so you can see, and I would think you'd want to take them to your ward meetings. We're gonna only allow them to start one of those 7 projects at a time and not do any more till that one's done. But it's very extensive. Virtually every residence in your ward is going to get a line bored across their front yard.
Hyperfiber.
We've just gotten those plans today.
As soon as you heard fiber, you got
Not just
goosebumps,
fiber,
didn't you? Hyperfiber. Okay.
Hey, I'm
Go ahead,
sorry,
Mr. Barrett.
on that subject, one thing that I recommend that several people have brought up is whenever they're planning, people have the stuff coming into their house on certain sides of the house, and AT&T's putting boxes in. It would be nice for them to look and see where those things are on those people's houses, because they're putting the fiber box in and they're going to have to go up on the other side of the house because, or not, they're going to have,
Yeah.
there's no way to get there unless you go through their driveway again to, cut or bore under their driveway to get that fiber into the house. And so where they place those boxes, on which side of the house that they place them is important based upon where the people have all their wiring and stuff going into the house.
I would point you, as they love to say on TV, I would point you to a gentleman named Jody Ewing in the engineering department who controls all the dig permits, and he'll shut them down in a heartbeat if they're not behaving about cleaning up afterwards.
I just went through that in my house, not with AT&T. But in the corner, or like in the cul-de-sac, there'll be one, and they'll go to your home. They did it on the wrong side, and we had to go to the other side. But it's not as difficult, because the fiber is very easily buried from the box, not to the house. But it's something to pay attention to.
Okay.
Is that it? Thank you. I just have one thing. For the next council meeting, February 15th, I'm requesting a departmental report on the number of public safety employees, that'd be fire and police, who were directed to quarantine by the city or department policy or CDC guidelines and charged annual leave for the duration of their quarantine. And I'll follow that up with an email so you got exactly what I want. Does 2 weeks from now, does that give the administration enough time to pull that together?
I think so.
Okay.
We've asked and asked.
I think we've got it in the personnel report that I have.
Okay, well, and if it's, if I can get it before then, that's fine. If you need a little more time, that's fine too. Just sometime in the next couple of weeks. I appreciate that. That's all I have. That'll bring us to the public agenda. And citizens' comments will allot up to 45 minutes for citizens' comments and permit each speaker up to 3 minutes. When you come to the table here, the mic is on. Sure, thank you. If you would, sign in on the sheet there with your name and address and state your name clearly so the council clerk can record your name accurately. Is there anybody on my left, your right, that would like to address the council? Ms. Campbell.
Carol Campbell, Vice Chair, Biloxi Tree Committee. We've provided y'all with a couple of documents tonight that we'd like to request be put in the record. The heading on the first is Mitigation/Replacement Requirements and Tree Funds, Other U.S. Southern Cities. And then the second is, has the heading Comparisons by Tree Committee for February 1st, 2022 City Council meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Is there anybody else on my left, your right, that would like to address the council? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
My name is Sabrina Stallworth. I'm co-owner of an art gallery, a wellness gallery on Howard Avenue. This is my business partner, Miss Natalie James Bonner. And I don't have any notes or anything. I just had questions and concerns. As a taxpayer and a citizen that lives in Biloxi, Fayard Street, my family property, I wanted to know, what is the city going to do about the beautification of downtown Biloxi? We have the brick pavers, that's nice, but there's no trees, no flowers. Are they planning on doing something with that? That's one question. The second question, is there any grant money for startup businesses to help with opening up a business in downtown Biloxi? That's all I have.
It's not a question and answer period, but the administration
Okay.
has heard your questions, and what I would urge you to do is get in touch with either the mayor or Mr. Leonard to his right, and they should be able to
Answer.
talk with you about that or provide you some information. Yes,
All right.
ma'am.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Anybody else on my left, your right? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Wyman?
As it relates to I'm Tracy Wyman. So, as Carol said, we've provided you with a couple documents, and just wanted to give you kind of a synopsis on what this is. So basically, relating to the changes to the tree ordinance, we want to be sure that they do two things: incentivize preserving the protected trees, and that the replacement trees that are removed are replaced with a sufficient quantity and species, so that we are truly replenishing the native stock of trees. I'm looking at this page right here, and the top portion of this page. Basically, that data is just provided as you begin to have the discussions and make the decisions around whether every tree that is approved would be liable for mitigation, as I think Dr. Tisdall suggested last week. So that top portion is so that you can have the information to kind of consider that question, the question. The second half of the form of the chart is charting out the removals that went through tree hearing, went to the Planning Commission and had a tree hearing for the past year. And I've just shown those with, as if the water oaks are removed. They're removed from the equation there. And then I offer you the comparisons of the old 3-to-1, the newly proposed 2-to-1, versus the scaled mitigation ratio. And basically what you're seeing there is that the mitigation, or the number of trees that are going to be requiring mitigation are significantly decreased with the water oaks going away. And so what we just want to see happen is we want to ask the question is, what can we do to strike a balance between mitigation requirements and incentivizing retaining our largest trees? And that is one thing that we saw that the scaled mitigation ratio did, is it provided a way to incentivize saving those 30 and 40-inch live oaks. So I'd urge you to consider that. And then the second handout is just a comparison of area cities across the southeast that have much more rigid mitigation ratios than what we're considering. And so we just give you this to see what some other worthwhile cities are doing.
Thank you, Ms. Wyman.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Anybody else on my left, your right? Yes.
My name is Julian Woodall, and I have some concerns about the Pops Ferry Bridge proposal, or at least from what I hear, it's still a proposal, about this private company coming in and trying to make a toll bridge, apparently. And I just have some concerns about that and worry about how it could affect the local neighborhoods and the schools around the area, as well as the marina nearby.
I think it's fair to say that it's a bit premature for questions yet. There's nothing that's come to the council. I know that there is, the mayor, I know you're dealing with the bridge building company or whatever, and just so we don't get trapped and go down some rabbit holes here, just very briefly a summary where we are.
Right, these are ideas, these are explorations. You know, some of the initial thoughts were a normal bridge cycle would take 15 years to do. One of the reasons why we listened to that idea was they could be possibly driving on the bridge in 4 or 5 years. So that's that's worth listening to. Again, it's a long way from becoming reality, or even the council has agreed to kind of listen to what they have to propose. I think they did a mail out over the weekend.
Yeah, I got a brochure in the mail, and my concern, and hearing from other people all around the neighborhood, and
well, again, it's a regional problem. It's not just a Biloxi problem, although it's not a Biloxi, it's not a state bridge. So we're having some efforts to get the ability to help the state, get the state to help us, get the federal government to help us in trying to do something similar to the Biloxi Ocean Springs Bridge after Hurricane Katrina. That's a $300 million bridge. You know, those, but because of the disasters, why that happened. So we're pressing to see what we can do. Again, there may be some short-term fixes to keep the bridge from getting stuck, you know, when in traffic that people get, but, you know, or the long-term would be to a high-rise bridge without a draw and, you know, a 4-lane as opposed to 2 lanes. So these are still ideas.
Well, thank you for listening to me. I understand that, you know, this was a premature question and everything, and I just want to thank you for listening to me and allowing me to sit in on the conversation and everything.
What neighborhood are you from?
I'm from North Biloxi, near the high school.
Okay, so you're either in Ward 4 or Ward 6, depending on where the line falls, right? Pay attention, we'll be doing a Ward 4 town hall meeting, but we'll be doing a segment all about the bridge. So we'll have a ton of information. We'll have the engineers that are proposing it, the administration will all be there, and we'll do an extensive Q&A session too, to help address everyone's concerns and needs, to try to figure out where we need to go as a community. So be on the lookout for that.
All right, will do. Thank you.
For being here.
Good deal. I'll do that. All right, thank you. Anybody else on my left, your right? Anybody on my right, your left? Anybody on this side of the room? Anybody in the back? All right, that concludes citizens' comments. We'll move on to the policy agenda. The first 3 items are second readings. If the clerk would read item A, please.
Ordinance to amend sections of the Land Development Ordinance pertaining to short-term rental use, prohibiting short-term rentals within recreational vehicles and mobile manufactured homes.
The motion was by Mr. Gaines, and the second was by Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Gaines is not here tonight. Mr. Lawrence, any comments?
Yeah, Jerry, you can break that down for everybody, exactly what we're trying to do, and
what this ordinance proposal would do, if passed, it would prevent anyone, park or a private person, from renting out their RV or mobile home for short-term rental. We had the situation on Pass Road at Majestic Oaks, where the park had designated 3 of their RVs in there, or their tiny houses in there, to be used. What this would do is prevent that from happening in the rest of the park.
that's what I thought you were trying to do. I can support that. That's a good thing for the RV parks.
Anything else, Mr. Lawrence?
That's it.
Any other questions by the council? Mr. Barrett?
So basically, regardless of location or anything, no mobile home, no RV could be a short-term rental.
No, only park-owned would be affected by this. In other words, the park would not be able to establish short-term rental. But if a private citizen comes into an RV park with their own RV, there's no limit on how long they can stay. They just would not be able to rent it out to someone else. They'd be allowed to use theirs for short-term rental.
Okay. That's,
For themselves.
no. Okay, so let's just hypothetically say I have a piece of property that I could go, and in the zoning, I could ask for a conditional use, and I have an RV on that property, or I have a mobile home on that property. Could I come and I wanted to use that to rent out short-term rental to someone? Could I come and apply for a short-term rental or a conditional use for short-term rental for a mobile home?
Not if this ordinance is passed,
Okay,
no.
that's the only question I have.
So,
Mr. Deming?
though in theory, I could rent my RV to somebody in the county and they could drive it in and park it at the RV park on a daily basis, new tenants. I just find that we're getting absurd with short-term rentals. I think if a park wants to do short-term rentals, look at the communities that have short-term rentals, these blighted properties get improved all the time. If RV parks, people don't rent dumps. They just don't. They go on there and they compare property to property. I think mobile home, especially if somebody wanted to improve their blighted mobile home park for short-term rentals, that would be a net gain for Mississippi, for Biloxi, excuse me. We'd all benefit from that, having an improved neighborhood, having more money flowing in the community. I just think that we're missing the mark on this, and I'm not sure why, unless it's just to prevent certain people from doing certain things. And then I'd have to vote against the ordinance in general, because I think it's on a principled basis that violates a principled basis of my own. Mobile home parks, RV parks, are designed for short-term rentals. So to restrict who can rent to who in that mobile home is absurd. I think that you're restricting the
Just some of the thinking behind the ordinance. The ordinance already prohibits boats in our ports and harbors from being used for short-term rental. Again, you're turning that RV, if it's an RV that you own or that you live in, then you're familiar with that vehicle. You know about it. But when you take it and you turn it into a hotel room and you have people coming in that's not familiar with it, it's a little bit more difficult. We have to go out and inspect it for safety. The fire department has to go out and inspect it before we issue a permit for them to use it for short-term rental. So it's just that the safety of the structure, I know from a zoning standpoint, if you consider it just from that side, it may not seem like a real issue, but when you look at it from a life safety issue, we think that this is probably the right thing to do.
If we had some data that would support the fact that there's an overwhelming amount of people renting RVs that are substandard for a living and it's caused injuries or deaths, then I would agree with you. But I don't think that's the case, and that's definitely not the case with any short-term rental, especially when you're going through Airbnb and VRBO. Those people are very rigid themselves with their processes and require licensing, and people compare and people rate, and they get disqualified off these sites, and they get disqualified off these sites as users of the sites too if they get bad reviews from renters or from the people that rent the structures of whatever kind it is. And so I just think we're limiting economic opportunity here, and we're basing it off of, I think, some fallacious premises. I agree that life safety issues are important, but I don't think that there's data to support that this would in somehow increase the incidence of life-threatening situations.
The fire department could probably provide you with some documentation to show that fires are much more frequent in mobile and manufactured homes than in other types of structures.
Look, I won't disagree with that, but it's irrelevant to the argument unless we're going to start limiting people from living in RVs and mobile homes, because it doesn't matter who's the person in the home, it's still a person in a home or an RV, and as soon as I buy an RV, it's the first time I've ever been in it, right? I don't think that people are so out of touch with what they're doing that because they haven't lived in this RV for a long time that they won't know what to do or how to handle themselves within an RV. They wouldn't be renting an RV on a short-term basis if they weren't familiar with the RV itself or with an RV situation or system itself. So I can't support it. I won't support it just because I think we're limiting the possibilities of what we can bring to Biloxi, especially when it comes to economic activity.
I'd like to add to that.
Go ahead, Ms. Lee.
Also, if you have to send someone out to check it out, then if it's not meeting your standards, you could also at that point say, this one we do not approve. And whether we approve it or not, if people are going to do it behind the books, then they're going to do it regardless. So we would at least like to be on the up and up with them and send someone out to check it and say, yeah, this one doesn't meet the standards, or it does, and maybe you can get it to the standards. Yeah, that's it.
Couple of comments. I'm assuming probably the best information you could get about safety and short-term rentals and I guess how prevalent or whether the nice ones stay in business and the ones that aren't well maintained don't stay in business, probably would be from Airbnb and VRBO. But as I recall, they give you literally no information or make any information available.
They have not been-
Literally none.
Yeah, they have not been cooperative in providing us with information that we've tried to get from them.
And just to be sure I understand, in reviewing this, short-term rentals cannot be established within RVs or mobile manufactured homes, correct?
That's correct. That's what we're proposing, yes, sir.
Okay. Any other discussion on this topic, Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, I do. The people that live in the mobile homes and these parks, 90% of them live there every day.
That's,
And the people that come in and out for the weekend, you're talking about two different worlds. Nobody's renting their trailer, short-term rentals. Those people live in those trailers. And a lot of people at the Majestic Oaks up there, the park, whatever it is, they don't want short-term rentals in there because it's just like a neighborhood. The majority of the people, probably 90% of them, live there full-time, and that's their home. And they don't want people just coming in and out. So, I mean, I disagree with Robert on that. I mean, I just think there's no different in the neighborhood. The people that live there, I mean, you go check it. How many people actually live there full-time? That's their home.
well, the bottom line question here, Mr. Lawrence, is do we want to turn RVs and mobile homes into hotel rooms? That's ultimately what this is all about.
Well, I don't. In fact, I think we spend more time on short-term rentals than anything we've been doing like that. And it's not gaining the city anything. It's just another expense. You can't prove we're going to get a penny from nothing. We never know what we get paid from anybody. A, B, and B, whatever they are. They get all the money. We ever get it from them? Who knows? We don't know. You can't prove we get the money back. And then it's supposed to be a commercial piece of property. Then you're supposed to charge more for the water. We don't even do that. And this is all the rules we have in place for short-term rentals, and we don't follow our own rules. And then the fire department got to go check them all the time, once a year. That's just another expense for the city. And I don't know what we gain from short-term rentals other than those discussions every week for an hour and a half. So, I mean, I don't see where we're going with that, with the short-term rentals. It's not doing, you need neighborhoods. You need people living there. That's how you build your town. You don't build a town on short-term rentals.
Any other comments, discussion? There being none, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the ordinance as presented? All opposed? Fails on a 2-3 vote. That brings us to the next item, also a second reading. If the clerk would read item B.
Ordinance to approve a zoning map amendment for a parcel of land from its split zoning district classification of residential, mobile, manufactured mobile home, and NB neighborhood business to RM residential manufactured mobile home for property located at 1718 Pash Road.
Motion was made by Mr. Guines, the second was by Mr. Glavin. Neither are in attendance this evening. My guess is Mr. Lawrence would ask Mr. Creel just for a brief description of what exactly we're doing.
This is Century Oaks. It's located just west of Lucky's Furniture, and the majority of their property is already zoned RMH. They have a small portion they own in the front that's zoned NB right now, and all they're asking to do is for a strip of that property in the front to be rezoned RMH to go along with the rest of the park. There's no issue here. They're not adding to the park or anything else. They're just changing a part of their zoning to RMH again.
Okay, Mr. Damon, comment, question?
So there has to be a purpose. Nobody does
My guess
anything-
is it has something to do with financing. Either they're getting ready to sell the park and the park does not want a split zoned piece of property, or they're trying to get financing and the bank would rather have them all be zoned the same way rather than have split zoning on it.
Is there anything on the section zoned for neighborhood business?
Yeah, they already have, the part that's right up near Pass Road, there's nothing on it right now. But there is a part of that NB zone property where they already have manufactured homes there. So split zoning is not something that planning departments like to see. It's we like to clean these things up, but this was their request, so that's why I say that my guess is they're probably getting it ready to either sell the park or refinance it.
That's right between Majestic Oaks and Lucky's is what you're talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments?
It's a senior home type of deal. There's no issues whatsoever. Everyone keeps up their park, their home, whatever you want to call it. It's very nice, no issues, so there shouldn't be an issue passing it.
No, I don't believe we've ever been called there for a code enforcement issue into this park.
Mr. Lawrence, question?
You gotta be kidding me. If we just pass something for short-term rentals, it won't take them that long to stick them in there. Once you do that, you're done again. All that nice senior park and all of that, that's not the purpose of this. And it has nothing to do with the bank. You already took care of them in the first one. So you want to turn the whole city of Biloxi into short-term rental? Fine, that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, any other comments or questions? There being none, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the ordinance as presented? All opposed? It's approved on a 4-1 vote. For the clerk, thank you. That brings us to item C, also a second reading. If the clerk would read that, please.
Ordinance to amend selected sections of the LDO as it pertains to tree committee, tree permit, and tree protection.
Let's see, I made the motion, and it was seconded by Mr. Guines. A couple of questions, Mr. Creel up front. And I think I asked this last time, but I can't recall what the answer was. Somewhere along the line, the city's beautification plan was mentioned. Can we find that online? Where, if somebody wanted to look at the city's beautification plan, would they get a hard copy from you, or is it online?
I'll have to check on that, Mr. Tisdale.
Okay.
I'll get you an answer back.
It'd be great if it was, or I'd even be happy to get a link to that. Thank you. Then the issue of mitigation trees that are owed, I guess, for the past, I don't know how long, but apparently there are hundreds, a couple of thousand trees I've heard mentioned. But under the old ordinance, or the current ordinance now, they're required to mitigate. And so folks owe trees, and some can't mitigate by putting trees on their property. So I don't know how we deal with that, but how do we collect those trees? Or
Well, one of the ways that we could do that is to pass this ordinance today, because we can't even offer the developer or the existing business the option of going through the tree bank until this ordinance gets passed. The tree bank does not exist right now. So that's what we would pass here. What we've done after last week's conversation is we've gone back, we've removed the table based on size as we discussed. We've added in the phase development projects, which was one of the concerns of the tree committee. If there is a phase development and on that overall piece of property more than 5 trees are going to be removed, it would be required to go through the public hearing process for approval. We've gone back and we've added in the 2-to-1 mitigation across the board. All commercial projects and all newly proposed subdivisions would be required to replace at 2-to-1 for every tree that they've removed. We've added in the language where if you remove a protected tree, you have to replace it with a protected tree. That was another concern of the tree committee, so that's in this proposed ordinance. We've added the mitigation trust, which is what I just mentioned, where we can, if it's approved, then we can offer that developer the option of paying into the trust rather than replacing the trees on their own piece of property if there's not room for it. Now, all of those things we've added in just as we discussed last week. You have 2 options before you tonight. Option A would go one step further. It would require the private homeowner that removes a tree on their piece of property to be required to mitigate. And option B would exempt the private homeowner from having to mitigate. Other than that, both of these options are exactly the same.
Okay, I'm sure there are going to be questions. I know I may have another question or two or comment. Mr. Barrett?
Only question I have is, we discussed last week about a developer basically filing as individual lots.
I mentioned that.
Is that, there's something in there
That was
preventing
the-
that from happening in the
Yes,
future?
that was the
basically?
phased development, that no developer would be able to come in and say, well, we're only going to develop phase one of this and have it looked on individually. If we look at that entire piece of property that they're going to develop, even the future phases, and more than 5 trees are going to be removed, then they would have to go through the public hearing process to get approval.
All right, that's the only question I have.
That's in there.
Any other, Mr. Lawrence?
So what is the best way with you're talking about the single family person, somebody just building up, say about 100 or 200 lot, and they can't clear trees? Or if they do, they have to do what?
If a subdivision developer comes in,
No, I'm talking about somebody, you said, we talking about single family people. When they
right,
do it, the
Councilman Tisdale had asked last week about any residential property, either existing or proposed, having to mitigate. So what option A would do is if you or I own our privately owned piece of property where we have an existing house, if we remove a tree from that property, option A would require us to go back and mitigate that tree at 2-to-1. But option B would exempt private lots, homeowners from having to do that.
If you mitigate, you have to build them on that land, and you build them anywhere.
It would, if the bank is approved, then the private owner could pay into the trust, just like the other developments would do.
So you put it somewhere in the city.
Yes,
You
sir.
wouldn't have to put it on a piece of property.
In other words, if that private homeowner does not want to replant trees on their piece of property, they would have the option then of paying into the tree bank, and then the tree committee working with the city could determine where those 2 trees would need to be planted on city right away or on city property somewhere else in the city.
And the price of the tree is what they would pay.
Sir?
The price of the tree.
They would pay 2-to-1, 2-to-1 at whatever the rate is at that time.
That'd be the same as anybody else would do.
Yes, sir.
Subdivision, anybody else.
In essence, what would happen is that anybody in the city that removes a tree, a protected tree, would have to mitigate it 2-to-1.
And if, like I asked you last week, if the tree's dying, it doesn't matter? If the tree itself is dying or falling apart, whatever,
Under option A, even if it's dying or dead and they replace it, they would have to mitigate it 2-to-1. Option B would exempt the private homeowner.
all right.
Any other questions? I have a question. Okay. We were looking at a scaled mitigation ratio earlier. You said that's been taken out, and it's now proposed as a 2-to-1 ratio for mitigation purposes.
2-to-1 across the board, based on our conversation last week, that with 2-to-1, we would be doubling what the cities around us are requiring. Ocean Springs, Gulfport, D'Iberville, all of them require mitigation at 1-to-1. We would be requiring it 2-to-1.
Right. The scaled mitigation actually is what I preferred, because the ratio changes based on the size of those protected trees that you're removing. If it's 2-to-1 across the board, as is currently proposed, if I'm taking out a tree that's 28 inches, 36 inches in diameter, I'm purchasing 2 mitigation trees.
Well,
Whereas
the trade-off for that would be, the people that are removing smaller trees that are replacing it 2-to-1, so you would get that balance that we're looking for, rather than it making it cumbersome on the one person that's removing a tree. You'll be getting fewer trees on the person that removes a larger tree, but you'd be getting more trees based on the people that are removing the smaller trees.
Right,
Makes sense.
but there is much less protection in terms of protection for larger established trees, simply because I can remove a big tree for the cost of 2 small trees. And under the scaled version, I think is what was proposed based on the diameter of the tree that was being removed, it would have been up to 5 or 6 trees based on the diameter of those protected trees. That's what I prefer, that's what I'd like to see in this measure, but I just wanted to be clear, that was taken out, and you're looking just at a 2-to-1 ratio right now.
Yes, sir. Let me give you an illustration on that. If the table remains in there and somebody removes a tree that's 30 inches or larger, they would have to mitigate 6 trees, but they would have to pay double the price for those 6 trees. So in essence, what's happening, they're paying on a 12-to-1 ratio for the 1 tree that was removed, because paying the 2-to-1, in addition to replacing 2-to-1, that cost is doubled in order to pay in case we have to do the installation or if there has to be a sprinkler system in there. So we just think the 6-to-1 or the 12-to-1 ratio is excessive, and we think that this is reasonable. That's the reason we proposed it.
I have a lot of, not everybody knocking up my door every day, but a number of people who said, Fairhope, Alabama is just a nice little place. If you want to model yourself for beautification purposes, Fairhope's a good place to look for. And thanks to Ms. Wyman, I think she did the research. If you replace a tree 5 inches to 9 inches, 5 to 10 inches basically, a protected tree over there, you pay $500. If it's a tree greater than 30 inches, you pay 10 grand. So what I'd like to point out is, and I'll go back to my point in all of this, is if you're going to protect these older trees, we need to do a good job of protecting them. The second thing is, if you want to see a canopy like we used to have when some of us were growing up, or even before the last hurricane, somebody has to bear the cost of that, or you won't have a canopy. Now, this mitigation bank, and as I recall, I had mentioned it up front, I just thought, if you're mitigating, this would be great for developers to write a check, put it in there, we can put the trees where we need them. But at a ratio of 2-to-1, I don't think we're doing enough to protect these big protected trees. And I worry about that going forward. That's all I'll say on this topic. I would offer, and go ahead, Mr. Deming, then when you're done, I'd like to speak again. Go ahead.
If I could borrow from you, I just want to make a couple of observations. Fairhope, Alabama is a completely different scenario. There are 21,000 people, and in the 2010 census, there were 22,000 people. So they're contracting. They have a very restrictive tree ordinance, and I'm not saying that's why they're contracting, but I'm not saying that's why they're not contracting, why that's not why they're contracting. You follow me. Again, the observation of the 7 cities with these extremely convoluted tree ordinances was hand-selected out of literally thousands of cities in the Southeast. And my question is, why were these selected? Because they're more convoluted than what we're proposing? Or is it because we're losing development to those areas? And I think that's really what we should be worried about. The people that we're losing development to are the cities right around us, and their tree mitigation requirements are 1-to-1. So literally twice as weak as ours. I would say if we talk about that, we're talking about as if we're winning, but I think developers would talk about that as if we're losing. And so that does strike a chord for me, that we're going in the wrong direction when it comes to development. I know I might be the guy that hates trees, and if I was famous, then they would have little caricatures of me burning down trees and making paper out of them and printing money on them, because that's like all I care about, I guess. But that's not the truth. The truth is, though, we have the intention of doing exactly what this document says. What this ordinance should do, and it says incentivize preserving live oaks. Well, a 1-to-1 does that. It preserves them. If one comes out, one goes back in. Preserves it. Replace protected trees. Well, if one comes out, one goes in. We're not replacing protected trees. We're adding more protected trees. So the language is incorrect here. I think what we should be doing is putting the onus on putting back what we take out. I don't think we should tell somebody that their moral standard or the moral compass is wrong because they don't want to do more than what we want them to do. Just do what they should do, which is take one out, put one back. I'm in favor of what all the cities around us are doing, 1-to-1, because that's how we keep our competitive advantage. Coming to Biloxi is better than going to D'Iberville. Coming to Biloxi is better than going to Gulfport, but it's not if they have to work so much harder to get here. And so I get that this is a little less restrictive than what was originally proposed. I would like to see it be even less restrictive. That's all I have, Doc.
Thank you. Anybody else have a comment? I would offer an amendment that rather than a mitigation ratio of 2-to-1, I'd offer an amendment to revert back to the scaled mitigation ratio that was originally presented. I'll make that motion. Is there a second? There being no second, it fails. Any other comments on this particular ordinance?
I'll make a motion to amend to change the language from a 2-to-1 ratio to a 1-to-1 ratio like our sister cities.
Second.
Any discussion? The only comment I'd add to that is take out a gorgeous oak, replace it with a skinny oak for about $150, which is what the market rate is. So
That will one day be a gorgeous oak as well.
if it's lucky, or until the next council comes along, it perhaps does away with the mitigation ratio entirely, because the other cities are doing away with the mitigation ratios. Just a thought. There's a motion and a second to amend it to a 1-1 ratio. The motion by Mr. Deming, second by Ms. Newman. Any other discussion? All in favor of that ratio? All opposed? It fails. There being no further discussion on this, I think, Mr. Creel, you said there's one thing we still have to decide.
Well, you'd have to decide option A or option B.
Correct. This is for the residential homeowner who's not a developer. Homeowner wants to remove an oak tree. Do they mitigate or not?
That's option A, yes.
Okay. Wondering how to proceed on this.
Point of order, if you may.
Go ahead, Mr.
Peter,
Deming.
when this was moved, at that point, they should have moved for that option. That should have been declared when this was moved.
We can offer could we not offer an amendment right now?
Who is the movement of this?
I support option B.
Who is the movement? Who moved this? Who put this on the table?
I moved it, but it was revised significantly after the discussion at the last council meeting.
I think that you would be the one that would be appropriate to moving it for the.
Right now, you've had two amendments to these proposed revisions, which both failed, so we're back to what is being proposed by Jerry right now, and then therefore, someone could move the adoption of Jerry's latest revisions as a new amendment.
Okay, well, the only thing is there's still a decision we have to make, whether it's option A or option B, and I'll go ahead and make that motion now, that we approve this and option A as noted for residential property owners. That is, they would be required to mitigate 2-to-1. Okay, is there a second to that? It fails for a second. That leaves us with the other option.
I'll make a motion for option B.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Barrett, that is no mitigation by the homeowner. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that? And to be clear, Jerry, what this means is I'm a homeowner, I want to go out and cut down that oak tree, I can go cut it down tomorrow.
Well, you come get a permit.
Have to get a permit, even though there's no mitigation, you still have to go to the community development office or download it online.
Protect a tree.
Complete the tree permit. Is there a charge for that permit? No charge for a tree permit, okay. So there's a motion by Mr. Barrett, second by Mr. Deming. Any other discussion? All in, Mr. Lawrence?
Just one question, when we move B, we moving the whole thing or just B?
Right now,
A's done. so
right now, we're
B
moving the whole thing.
B,
We have to vote to adopt the amendment.
on the B.
It's, I don't think it was an amendment.
That's, all the option goes with B.
Right. I moved option A, what was proposed, the ordinance option A, that failed for lack of a second. So Mr. Barrett moved that we adopt the ordinance
With option B.
with option B. And that's where we are now. And that was a motion by Mr. Barrett, a second by Mr. Deming. So if there's no further discussion, we go ahead and vote on the matter.
Saying that moves everything on the B,
No, sir.
the whole thing.
Okay. What this would do, Mr. Lawrence, this would exempt the private homeowner. They would not have to mitigate if they take a tree down in their yard. That's what option B is.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, does it move everything with B? I'm talking about with the whole.
Yeah, everything else that was presented tonight, the ratio of 2 to 1.
2 to 1, all that, that's all. Okay.
That's correct.
So, all you had to explain, that's no biggie.
Okay, so any other discussion? Everybody thoroughly confused? Okay, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the ordinance as presented, that is with option B, that exempts residential owners from mitigating. It's approved on a 5-0 vote. Thank you. Excuse me just for a moment.
Consent agenda.
Thank you. That brings us to the consent agenda.
Move.
There's a motion by Mr. Lawrence and a second by Mr. Barrett. Okay, Mr. Lawrence, we'll start at your end if there are any questions.
Yeah, I'm going back to the Pine Street thing. 20 years ago, we did the exact same thing. At that time, though, Ferraro was putting up $7 million. We had a grant for $5 million. Now you stop them before you get to Ferraro's property. It was $22 million to do that. What does it cost nowadays?
It's two different animals. We're not crossing Fifth Street.
I understand that.
Not crossing. That's where the $5 million grant was titled. At the time, the owner was supposed to come up with $7 million. We were supposed to put a 4-lane boulevard that would cost $17 million. This is a widening of that thing to Fifth Street, as well as inclusive of some of the things that we're going to do at Highway 9. Two different animals, whole different structure. We'll have a 3rd lane on Pine Street. We'll get some credit, I think, with the work that's going on now with the FEMA project to offset some of that cost. So it's going to give us a better access with the bridge around the low area right to the east of the warehouse, I think, that Palace owns. So apples and oranges at this point. But we're thinking it's going to be a total, including raising the intersection at Howard Avenue and Pine Street up. So, the flooding that takes place, I think that's whole as a bowl right there. And we did a little bit on First Street, I think, Walt's here. And the proposal is to see if we can get it even higher at Howard Avenue. I think $10 million.
So how much?
$10 million instead of the $17 million plus the 7. So, it's a completely different thing for completely.
But I mean, all you have on Fifth Street is the casino that was there. And you got the shipyard. So what's the purpose of widening Pine Street to get to that? There's nothing
Well,
there.
some of the opportunities that the development at the old original Margaritaville site is why we're looking at that.
I mean, that's a lot of money to widen the street that just runs to the railroad.
And we're hopeful that we get some. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but it costs a lot of money to do anything to streets. But basically, we raised First Street at Pine Street. We're going to raise Howard Avenue at Pine Street, so you don't have to get isolated if you were at your property and trying to go east. So there's a whole lot of development opportunities. The original things that are going in the amusement park, as well as some of the possibilities that's going to happen just north of Margaritaville, the beach, indoor water park, as well as some of the things that Margaritaville, the original Fifth Street Margaritaville has as far as development opportunities. about $364 million on that spot is what's talked about.
I don't quite understand when, lived down there 50-something years right there where you're talking about, what are you talking about raising the street? You gotta raise all the property. You can't just raise the street.
The intersection, yeah, you can. You can.
Why are you gonna drain the property then? How much you raising the street?
We're hopeful 3 or 4 feet. And again, Gulf Regional Planning Commission and some of these other folks have talked to us about the ability to tie in. You and I have talked about the exit from the Biloxi Ocean Springs Bridge to Howard Avenue and keeping that at a grade such that the water will not, when, and high tide, Billy Ray will tell you why the reason even a high tide water backs up through there. So we're trying to give you a pathway. I'll be happy to talk to you about that in detail because there's truly some opportunities to move on this right now.
I know, I'd like to have a lot more information. I mean,
You'll get a lot more
A
information.
lot of money. I don't know, some.
But we can do nothing and nothing will happen.
So, I just, that's my job. Ask these questions, and your job's to answer them. And me, I don't understand.
answer them as best I can, and we've got the details.
Yeah, I don't understand where we're going to spend that kind of money. And I know development, Margaritaville, they're doing quite well on both sides of the street. I just don't quite get the raising the street and that much money to widen Pine Street that don't go anywhere. Runs on the side of Harris and runs right to the railroad track. I mean, I don't know what you're gaining.
Again, the reason is the development that is anticipated along with what we're trying to do to that access to both of those properties.
Okay, and you got the senior citizen home there. So are you going to be on the east side?
Won't impact them at all. Be to the east side, right there where the bayou comes up.
Yeah, and also all the water on the side of
Be a bridge.
Pine Street.
There'll be a bridge that crosses that from Pine Street to Fifth Street. We got the details. We'll show you the path. I mean, that's why we're trying to explore the opportunities on both ends.
I'd like to ask the council to table this, only for me to go sit with Fofo, and I'll meet with him tomorrow, so I can get all the information I can for that whole area. Not a lot of people live down there, anything, so I mean, I'd just like to
Yeah, we
find
will
out.
unless you make a move on it.
To make a move next week, or when are you gonna vote again? I mean, you put this on late today. I didn't get to see it.
Late today.
It was added on, so I didn't get to look at anything.
Fair
That's all I'm asking. If
Is
y'all-
that in the form of a motion, Mr. Lawrence?
It's actually all of them that was added on about Pound Street.
Okay, there are two, 5H and 5I. So there are two items under the consent agenda. You've made a motion, correct me if I'm wrong, you've made a motion to table these?
Right.
Do we want to
Appreciate
table them
that,
until the
David.
next council meeting, which is 2 weeks from tonight?
That's fine. I'll meet with him as fast as I can. Not a problem, if y'all will support that for me.
There's a motion to table these two items, 5H and 5I. 5H creates a capital project for Pine Street, basically, and 5I is professional services for preliminary engineering and design. Mr. Lawrence has made that motion. Is there a second to table it? I'll make that second. Is there any discussion? Again, this is put on a little late. I'd like to know more information, and I'd like to look at exactly, and I'm sure there's a reason for why the mayor wants to do this, but I'd like to spend some time, if y'all are meeting sometime in the near future, I'd like to sit down and look at that as well. Any other discussion on this? So
I think I'm satisfied with what I've been given, but as a professional courtesy, I'll support your motion to table. Just remember that.
I will.
All right, any other discussion on 5H and 5I, and the motion to table it for basically 2 weeks till next council meeting? All in favor? It's approved on a 5-0 vote. Any other items, Mr. Lawrence?
I know that was the only one. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Newman, anything? Mr. Deming, anything? No. Mr. Barrett, anything? I have nothing. Okay, all in favor of the consent agenda is presented, and we'll come back for exceptions. Bless you. All right, it's approved on a 5-0 vote. Any exceptions other than 5H and 5I, which were tabled? Mr. Lawrence, any exceptions?
None.
Ms. Newman, any exceptions? Mr. Deming? Mr. Barrett? Okay, there being none, we'll move to code enforcement hearings. Mr. Creel.
Item A, Roy E. and Emily A. Gilmore Estate, 330 Penny Avenue. This property is still in violation.
All right, we'll open this hearing. Roy and Emily Gilmore Estate, 330 Penny Avenue. Roy, you said it's still in violation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anyone here to speak to this matter? 330 Penny Avenue, Roy. Closed. This brings us to the next hearing, Jones Enterprises, 339 Forest Avenue.
This property is still in violation.
Where on Forest Avenue, or what is this close to, Jerry, on Forest in terms of maybe Division Street and the Keesler Gate there?
This would be south of the gate. It's just down from the house that we just tore down at 367.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha. All right, is there anyone here to speak to this matter at 339 Forest Avenue, Jones Enterprises Incorporated? There being none, this hearing is closed. Thank you, Mr. Creel. That brings us to the routine agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Lawrence, is there a second?
Yeah, Walt,
Mr. Barrett seconded that. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Lawrence.
let's see, we get an update on anything come in, any money?
No money coming in, Councilman. I know past couple meetings, first it started at 1.5 million, and then I think at the last meeting I reported MEMA was looking to submit to us 1.9, but since then, it's going to take a little bit longer because there's an additional $490,000 they want to add to that and get one big tranche. So we're looking at 2.474 million. It's going to take a few more weeks to get it to us, but it's close to an additional $500,000, so I decided that'd be a good choice.
It's the second thing we added on top of that, right?
Yes, sir. So the total is 2.474.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Council members, any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, there being none, we'll call for the question on the routine agenda. All in favor? It's approved on a 5-0 vote. I'll entertain a motion to recess by Mr. Lawrence. Is there a second? By Ms. Newman. Any questions? All in favor? Count that as a 5-0. I think I saw Mr. Deming raise his hand. He could have been stretching back there, but okay. Thank you. Thank you all for being here this evening. We're recessed.